So today we're talking about Jewish ritual objects. One of the things we're talking about is a kippah, and we say that people wear it when you cover your head. It's showing that you are in God's presence. You have a question, go.
If a woman could only be showing her hair to her husband, if she shaved it off, she doesn't have anything to only show to him. So I'm not getting the connection.
It was a way of dividing a before and after for women who their hair was shown when they were young to other people, and then they shave it off, they get married, and then the hair that grows in will only be seen by their husband.
Oh, so they're allowed to grow it back in. It's just
oh yeah,
shaved.
They grow it back in. No, they don't keep it bald. They don't keep it bald. And I had a friend, an Orthodox woman, one of the best Talmud scholars in the country, and she was Orthodox, and she would not be seen by any man without her head covered, but she wore like these see-through blouses. I'm not kidding. I couldn't believe this. There was one day, and never mind. Anyway, and I hope that I'm not revealing who it was. Mom, are you raising your hand too? Wait.
I think that part of the reason with the wig and everything is because men can't think about anything, and the husbands are not supposed to think only of sex.
Part of the reason for what?
The wife is beautiful and she has her old hair that he fell in love with. Did you follow that?
Wait, so they fall in love with a woman and she's beautiful, and then you take off the part of her that he fell in love with so that he doesn't have to think about sex anymore?
Right.
Nice try. She's joking. Lexi.
Why would I'm still trying to wrap my head around why a woman would completely shave her head when right before she gets married.
Well, I'll tell you what, maybe what we need to do, I guess we already did the life cycle one. It's not before she gets married, it's after she gets married.
So in other words, her wedding, she has her hair, and then sometime right after the honeymoon, she shaves it.
You know what? No, no, I didn't say that either.
I'm trying to figure out a timeline.
So let me tell you that the number of people who are Orthodox in the world who do this make up less than 10% of all the Jews in the world. So if you want to talk about one of the things we're supposed to talk about next week is one of the things we're supposed to talk about next week is the differences between the different denominations of Judaism. So I think that instead of us getting bogged down on some of these differences in Orthodoxy now, I would really rather do it next week.
Okay.
Anticipate some of the kinds of questions we're going to ask. I get how people are going to get upset about this, and you're going to need to know about this. But what I will tell you is that for most people, this is not the tradition, and it is not the, we could just do a whole session about kosher sex. I don't mind. We could do that one day, and talk about kosher sex from a Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, and Orthodox perspective. We could talk about that. But for now, what I wanted to talk about was cover your head. Why do you cover your head? Who covers their head? These days, women in the Reform movement, in the conservative movement, when I was growing up in the Reform movement, women weren't covering their heads either. Nobody was covering their head. In fact, when I moved to Shreveport, the rabbis weren't covering their heads. And if they tried to wear a kippah or a yarmulke, they would be told not to. The rabbis were told not to. And so it was not appropriate because the Reform movement for a time felt that they needed to not do the things that were marked by old world Judaism. They needed to be new world Judaism. But that has changed. And now at B'nai Zion, for example, it is optional, but it is optional for everybody. That's what it means to be egalitarian. Everyone gets to choose. And I choose to wear a kippah when I'm studying holy books, when I am leading a service, when I'm saying the blessings, I will try to cover my head. But I had this very interesting thing that happened when I was in the last days of my rabbinic school we did in Manhattan, just before the ordination, with the rest of my class. It's the first time I had met anybody else from my class. There were 9 of us all together, 2 women, 7 men. And one of the guys, I think I told you, started off as a priest. He was studying to be a priest. And he had to take Old Testament class, and he took it. The guy that was teaching the Old Testament class near him was a rabbi. The more he was learning from the rabbi, the more he realized that this resonated with him. And then he found out that his grandfather was a Sephardic Jew. And he found out that he came from a long line of Sephardic rabbis. And this guy, so he and I got together one day because he was worried that his Hebrew was not as strong as everybody else's Hebrew. So we got together to practice saying the prayers that we knew we had to say in public. And he said, so I had a problem because we were told that we were obligated to wear a kippah, everyone, male and female, obligated to wear a kippah, obligated to wear a talit. And he said he had a problem with that because in his minhag, in his custom, when you walked into a synagogue, you don't wear a kippah anymore, because then you know you're in God's presence too. And that was a very interesting, I had never heard that before. And I wore a kippah when I was praying and doing things when I was married, but I was recently divorced. So I wasn't sure if I should be wearing my kippah to walk into the synagogue. If it depended, so I would wear a kippah if the congregation required it, but I wouldn't necessarily wear one for me. So anyway, but I did, and he did, and we came to understand kippot in other ways. Yeah, unmuting you, go.
I grew up at a conservative synagogue, but when I was in my 30s, I decided Reform was much more me. But the Reform synagogue I go to now, which is my second Reform synagogue, years ago, it was frowned upon to wear a talit or a yarmulke.
Exactly.
Totally
like ours.
optional now. Some of the men wear them. Some of the men don't. Some
And
of the
that's-
women do.
And some women do. And you're going to find throughout the Reform movement that a lot of Reform Judaism looks a lot more like conservative Judaism than it does Reform. My congregants get very angry at some of those congregations that are doing, everybody's wearing yarmulkes and the whole service is in Hebrew, and like, why are they doing that and whatever. So they get very upset about that. But I don't. And I feel like everybody has to do what is comfortable for them to do. And what is meaningful for them to do. There was a period of a few years when I stopped wearing a talit, which is one of the next symbols that I wanted to share with you. First, I want to share this. Do you know what this is? This is a challah cover.
Oh, okay. Oh.
And this is a challah cover. I'm not showing you normal looking ones. I'm showing you unusual ones. This one was made by my friend from South Africa, and he was in he's a something like 17th generation jeweler, and he's got some really creative ideas, and he was in a camouflage mode. And if you notice, this is camouflage, but it's like Jewish symbols. It's Stars of David, and it's dreidels, and it's things like that. So this is, and that's supposed to be a Star of David, I think, on there. And I like this, and it was affordable. He's a jeweler, and a lot of his stuff was too expensive for me, but I could afford this. And so that's a challah cover. And there's a reason why we cover our challah. Does anybody have a reason why you cover your challah? So I'm going to tell you the rituals, the way rituals work on this. On Shabbat evening, you will say a kiddush, which is a blessing for wine, and it's a paragraph long, and it's long, and you sing about creation and coming out of Egypt and all of these things, and you'll sing this whole long thing. And then you are going to say a blessing for the challah, and it's a one-liner. And so in order to not embarrass the poor challah, which is a very, very, very important part of the meal, you cover the challah while you're saying all of these extravagant blessings over other things. And so we cover the challah. Challah, by the way, we talked a little bit about food. Challah is potentially, arguably, another symbol of Judaism that you have in your house. And it did look a little bit like a talit, which is part of why I wanted to show you this one. I like this one because it was white and stripes, and it did remind me a little of a talit, and it has fringes on it. And a talit is something that has fringes on it, but a talit, which was the next thing I wanted to share with you, a talit is fulfilling a commandment. So it's not a commandment about wearing a kippah, although sometimes a custom takes on the weight of a commandment. And so the Orthodox will tell you it is a commandment, and the Orthodox might tell you why a woman shouldn't wear one, and that it's a commandment for women not to wear one, and that we can look at some of those discussions if you'd like, but I wanted to share some of these other things first. So there's a commandment that says that you're supposed to take your four-cornered garments, and on your four-cornered garments, you're supposed to have tzitzit. And you may find a translation of that where it says you're supposed to put tassels on your four-cornered garments, but these are tassels, and this is a tzitzit. And you don't have to have these kind of tassels on your four-cornered garments, even though that actually, I never thought of it, both of my challah covers have tassels, but they don't always. But that's just decorating. This is tzitzit. Tzitzit I like to call something like elaborate Jewish macrame. Tzitzit are specially knotted threads, and it says that you're supposed to take your four-cornered garments, and it's supposed to have what's called a patil tchelet, which is a blue thread in it. But for almost 2,000 years, we have not had a blue thread in it, because the blue thread came from a special kind of snail, which some people may find ironic. There's a lot ironic about the talit and the materials that it's made of, and the things that are permitted and not. But I don't want to get into all of that yet now. I wanted to talk about how you make a talit and what is the purpose of a talit. So it says your four-cornered garments have to have a tzitzit, and it says you have to see them. And when you see them, it will remind you of all of the commandments. So those are really important things to remember. See them, remind you of the 613 commandments, because we have 613 commandments. So how is looking at these things going to remind you of having 613 commandments? So the way they're designed, and different cultures have somewhat different ways of tying and wrapping. But imagine this: I have 4 long strands of string, and I take them and I make them even at the bottom, and I have one that's way longer than the others. It's even with the others at one end, but it's way longer on the other end. And I put it through this hole in the corner, and I double it over. So now it looks like I have 8 strands. I only have 4 strands. And I take the long one. I take both of them, and I'm going to do a double knot. And then I take the long one, I'm going to wrap it around 7 times. And then I do another double knot. And then I'm going to wrap it around 8 times. This is the Ashkenazic tradition from where I come from. And then I'm going to double knot, wrap it around 11 times, double knot, wrap it around 13 times, double knot. And if you added up all of the strings and all of the knots for all of the corners, what do you think you get? 613? You'd be wrong, but that's what I would have guessed too. If I were you, I would have guessed 613. But you have to add, in addition to all of the knots and all of the wraps, you have to also add the numerical value of the word tzitzit, and then you get to 613. And so if you look at it, then you can remember to do all of the commandments. And there's more to a talit, and that is, you'll notice that when I show you either of these challah covers, they're usually rectangular, but on a talit, it's not just rectangular, but if I go back far enough, you might see more. but it's not just rectangular, but it also has what's called a crown, like a band on the top. This one just has a lovely pattern, which is replicated on the sides. I like this one. This one is actually even a different size than that one. This is kind of a double width. So this one has the words Eitz Chaim Hi, it is a tree of life, and it's got a tree of life design on it. And when I say double, it's like, imagine, I can't show you the whole talit. I can't go far enough back. I'd crash into my printer. But imagine that this is the first talit. That's how wide it is. So the second one I'm showing you is this wide. And when I wear it, I have to wear it in a slightly different way. There's some talesim, that's the Yiddish plural, or talitot, that's the Hebrew plural, that are way bigger. And I didn't bring one of those because you wouldn't have been able to see it anyway. And you have to wrap it around. You have to hold it and you have to take a corner and pull it over. I have those too. I sometimes use them for a chuppah when you're getting married, and I use it as the canopy for that. And when you put on your talit, you take the atara, the crown, you hold it one end of the crown in one side and the other end of the crown in the other side, and you hold it facing you. You do not ever let the tzitzit touch the ground if you can avoid it, not because it'll break it, but it's disrespectful. And so I'm holding it and I say the blessing. I'm going to try to make it so you can see this bigger. Some of you get to see this every Saturday morning when we have our service. That's a lovely rainbow one. That one, by the way, has the blessing for saying the talit on it. But this, let me show you. So there's an inspiration that you say before. You could say this. The inspiration says in English, as you see, bless the eternal one, my soul. O God, you are very great, arrayed in glory and majesty. You wrap yourself in light as with a garment and stretch out the heavens like a curtain, that it's as if God is wearing a talit all the time, which is a pretty cool thing to think of. But the blessing for wearing a talit is one where we say, as you see in English, so if I say it, I have to put it on. You can't say a blessing and not do the thing. Otherwise, that's how I think one of the ways of taking God's name in vain is when you say a blessing and you don't do the thing. So I would be holding this with the two corners, my fingers holding the ends of the two corners. And I would say, blessed, praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe. You make us holy by giving us commandments. Command us about wrapping in the tzitzit. Baruch atah Adonai, praise are you, Adonai. Eloheinu, our God, melech haolam, ruler of the universe. Asher kedeshanu, who made us holy, b'mitzvotav, with commandments. Vitzivanu, and commanded us, lehitatef, which sounds like to hit the tape. Lehitatef batzitzit, to wrap up in the tzitzit. And then you kiss the corners, and then you do what I call the na. And when I put on my talit, I wrap myself up and I take a moment of privacy. And right here, it's just me and God in here. And I take as long as I need, and then I'm wearing it. Now, the traditions about a talit are, so you had to remember the rules. Four-cornered garment, that's easy, right? And then you have to see them. And when you see them, it reminds you about all the commandments. So those two things, the fact that you have to see them and the fact that you have to be reminded, tells you why women are, some places are forbidden from wearing a talit, but in some places why women don't wear one. What was it that I said about you shall see them? And it reminds you about all of doing all the commandments that make you think that women shouldn't wear one, she says while she's wearing one. What were your clues that women shouldn't wear one? Wait, everybody's muted. So if you want to just say something, you have to unmute yourself or raise your hand and I'll unmute you. What is it about you shall see them and you shall remember all of the commandments?
Okay, I'm up. Am I up?
Yep, you're up now. Go.
I think you're not supposed to see them.
You're not supposed to what?
See them.
See the tzitzit?
Yeah.
The commandment is you have to see the tzitzit.
No, I don't mean that. I mean the one before that. You shouldn't be trying to wear it.
Why? So the question is, why shouldn't a woman wear it? And what is it about seeing them? So we've got other people raising hands. Lots of people getting on the bandwagon here. Look. So Lang was first. Lang was next about why. Go.
Because women are not bound. How's it worded? By the positive time-bound commandment. So
Women
they
are not-
don't have to remember all of them.
Kinda. That's a good way to put it.
Not remember,
good
but-
one.
That's a good way to put it. So women are not bound by positive time-bound commandments. So the commandments, there are 613 commandments, and the positive ones are the thou shalts, and the negative ones are the thou shalt nots. And all of the thou shalt nots we're supposed to do, but of the ones that are the thou shalts, if they are time-bound, we are not obligated to do them because if a baby is throwing up or hungry, we have an obligation to take care of those babies because we can feed them and the guy can't. If I have an infant, we can feed it and the guy can't. This is way before formulas, okay? Or as we like to say, espresso. There wasn't even espresso in those days. So if the woman is obligated to take care of the child, that was considered a higher spiritual thing to do, to take care of your child, than to be participating in prayer at a certain time, let's say, or anything like that. So, but how do you know that this is a time-bound commandment? How do you know it's positive? Because it says you shall put the tzitzit on your four-cornered garments. But how do you know what part of this made it sound like it was a time-bound commandment? Remember, I said two things. What were the two things you have to remember? You shall see them and remember all the commandments. So you interpreted all the commandments in a new way. That was good. But the thing is about the see them, you can only see in the daytime. You can't see when it's dark. This was before electricity. So the positive time bound, the commandments that have to do with daytime things, we are not obligated to do because daytime is a time bound thing. And so I can't see them in the night. I can only see them in the day. And so that's how I know that it is a time-bound commandment. But there's another reason other than the one that Lang gave, which was really brilliant, actually. That was the mathematical answer. I hadn't thought of that before. But the other reason, I saw Berta and Marla, Lexi all had answers. So Berta, you want to go next?
Well, I was thinking that
Carol, everybody's got an answer now. This is good.
that they had, the men went to synagogue, the woman stayed home. She had an apron over her dress, and you wouldn't put a talit either under or
Your
over an
four-cornered apron, but if it was a no, I'm just kidding. That's good. We're talking like 2,000-year-old aprons. Yeah. Okay, I got you. Well, but so part of it is, it does, you can already see then how sometimes a tradition does take on the weight of a law, because tradition was the woman was home and she was putting on her apron. You can't imagine her doing that. But tradition also says that the man would have done, he didn't have to go to services. He could have done them at home. In the morning, he would have put on his tefillin. He would have been putting on his talis to say his prayers. Every single morning, he would be putting on his talis every morning. By the way, talit is the Hebrew word, talis is the Yiddish word, Yiddish pronunciation. If I keep interchanging between the two, it's because that's who I am. So we can't imagine a woman wearing a talit because she's got an apron on, but that's good too. What happens is this. Here's a really cool sorry. I have two other people who want to try to answer this. So I've got Marla and I've got Carol. Go. Marla, go first. I think you
I
had
have the same answer as Lang, so that my
okay,
answer's-
good. No, I like your answer too then. The mathematical answer, go, Carol.
Okay, is it time bound because you're supposed to say like the morning prayers at a particular time of morning, you know, after you see, I don't know how many stars it is in the sky, then it's okay to start with the morning prayers.
Well,
So-
it's time bound because you have to see them. And so that makes it time bound. So you should not wear a talit. You see what I did? I put on my talit after it got dark. You should not put on a talit after dark. You're supposed to put on talit at in the daytime only. There are exceptions to when you can put on a talit at night. One of the exceptions is if you're leading the service, you could put on a talit. Another exception is Yom Kippur. You wear a
Right.
talit for every single service. And another exception is if I'm teaching, I can do it at any time. But normally you would only wear a talit in the daytime for worship services. And it's not because it gives you fewer commandments. It's because women are naturally more spiritual. Women do not need a physical reminder to do spiritual things. That is why a woman is not obligated to wear a talit, because women are naturally more spiritual. You're welcome for that. All right, sorry, let's do this. I still have 3 people with hands up. Lexi, you have an answer or you have a question?
Kind of an answer. I go along with line with they're not obligated to wear because they're not obligated to keep the commandments like the man is. But I never thought about, or I was never told about the time component. I was just, my understanding was the women are not obligated to keep the commandments like
So
the
I
guy
want to
is.
remind you. So Lexi, here's the thing. Commandment means commandment. It means you're commanded. It's not a choice. You've been in the military. It means it's not a choice. It's a commandment. If God says you have to do this, then everybody has to do it. And the thing is that it eventually was realized that if women have this other obligation, then there's a hierarchy in a sense of, is it more important to be taking care of infants or more important to be putting on your talit every morning at the same time? And the answer is women are obligated, but they're not obligated to this because they're obligated to do spiritual things. But women do not have to be reminded to do the physical things because they're naturally spiritual, and they're not obligated to the time-bound things because they may have to be taking care of their kids. So it's not because women are the weaker sex or the fairer sex or women were not treated equally throughout. Women have lots of responsibilities too, but this was not one. All right, we're going to go. Marla's next.
Okay, my question has to do with in all of my experiences in conservative and Orthodox temples, the rabbis for services in various sizes, some of the ones like the Jagunda one you were talking about, that was in the Orthodox synagogue, they did not wear robes. Where did the robe come from that the tallis goes over? Because I think it makes y'all look like priests.
Well, that was the point. I mean, what was happening then was you want to look like a clergy. That's what clergy looked like. I thought we looked like football players.
Protestant pastors don't wear robes, only
Some don't.
Catholic priests.
Some around here, almost many clergy in the South wear robes when they are leading services. And so in my congregation, as soon as I was ordained, the very first thing that they wanted me to do was get my robes. And we had a fight about the robes. I don't know if you heard this story, because there's a tradition in the Reform movement that 25 years after a rabbi is ordained, they can qualify for an honorary doctoral degree. And when you're a doctor, when you have a doctoral degree, then you get these stripes that are put on your robe. Only men had ever been rabbis up until this point, and 25 years worth of rabbis up until this point. But that was the tradition. So when they told me I needed to get robes, I'm like, robes? Okay, I got robes. How do you get robes? So I had to call another rabbi friend who does wear robes, and he told me where to go. And I have to call this place that does mostly judicial robes, judge robes. And apparently the same kind of a robe that I wear is the same kind of robe that you would wear in a sense for the judges but it's also the scholastic robes, like the academic robes that for degrees, the professors who are marching for pomp and circumstance and graduations. So they asked me all these questions when I was getting fitted for the robe. by phone, and they asked me, do I have any degrees? And I said, yes, I have a doctoral degree. And they said, well, then what was the degree in? Because the color of the stripes are determined by the kind of degree you have. And I have a humanities degree, thank goodness, where the color is white, because I don't think I would have liked like bright orange stripes on my Yom Kippur robe. I think that would have been very bad. But it was white. And so I told the guy who told me I had to order my robes, and I said, they told me that I should get I didn't know this. I said, but they told me that even as a liturgical robe, even as a, rabbi robe, I should be wearing my doctoral degree stripes on it. And he said, you can't do that. I said, what do you mean I can't do that? He said, you have to wait 25 years. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm already a doctor. So we had this whole fight. And fortunately, that weekend, there was a rabbi visiting us that weekend who was our regional director. And he said, no, she can wear it. And so we compromised. I'm not kidding. If you look at my robes, you will see I have a dark robe, which most women chose a navy blue robe instead of a black robe. So I chose navy blue because they told me that was more of a woman thing to do. So, and on my dark robe, I have 3 piping stripes that are down the center, down on either side on the panels. And then my white robe has the 3 bars almost and they're white bars. But I thought that was all very funny. And I had to replace them. They got ruined one time. We had a leak in our roof, and they got ruined. And I replaced them. And 1 week later, they got ruined again. But anyway, but that's what I keep doing. I keep getting the blue with the white stripes on the piping and the white with the white bands. Carol, your hand's up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, is it Talis stuff? We're back to Talis things. So I should say then, for my robe, for my Talis robe, my Talit for my robe, they have this special, and they had to design these things. There is something in Christianity called a stole, which they stole from us. And that but it's not the same thing. It's a little bit like a talit, but it doesn't have to have tzitzit on it. But I have 3 different, they call them cantorial talises. And I have 3 different ones that I have. The first one I got was silver. It was all silver work. I mean, it was like rough silver. It was all silver. And it had a great Yiddish name to it. The design pattern was called geflichte, which I love, but it looked geflichte. And then I ordered another one from one of my favorite Israeli designers that was pomegranates, but he had his pomegranates that were all very colorful. And I wanted it for my white robe. I wanted to be able to wear it anytime, but I especially wanted something for my white robe. And so it was, he did it with white and silver and gold coloring. So it's really pretty. And it was the first one he had ever made. And so now he's making more like that. And then I also had one, which had a lovely story to it, that there was a woman who had there was a design she was using as her pattern. She was making these talises, and as part of her ribbons, whether it was on here or down here, was a song, a Hebrew psalm about Kol HaNeshama Tehalel Yah, that all of the soul will praise God. Your whole Kol HaNeshama, every breath, every part of your soul will praise God, or every soul will praise God, or all of your soul will praise God. And so I've loved it. And it's expensive. These things are expensive. And so I walked past it, and I have to usually walk past one more time. And I went there and I said, I really love this one. I'm going to get this one. And so she writes up a ticket for me. And while we were standing there and we were schmoozing with other people coming in, this young woman who had just become a rabbi or just become a cantor or something like that comes up and she says, that one that had the music on it? I decided I deserve it. I'm going to buy it and I want it. And she'd already started writing me up, and I said, let her have it. It's okay. And she didn't have any more of this ribbon. She didn't have any more of those talises with her at the biennial. And she went back and she had no more of the ribbon. And so she had to commission more ribbon made like that. So I got a say in the ribbon and I got a say in the tallis. And so I have stories behind every single one of my tallises. I love them all. For a while, I could not pick one that was me. I could tell you which ones weren't me. I couldn't pick one that was me. And now I have a few. And they each have a different purpose. But they
Oh, I
feel,
remember.
yeah, go, Carol.
I remember what I was saying. I have my father's tallis. It's in a beautiful royal blue velvet bag with a rope making the Jewish star. And the tallis is white, and I believe it has gold, and it has the blessing for putting on the tallis with vowels.
Huh,
It's one of my
with
most
vowels, and many of them
treasured
do.
things.
Many of them do. And if you'll notice,
We're
that
assuming it was a bar mitzvah.
it could have been a bar mitzvah one, but it doesn't have to be. It could have been for bar mitzvah or wedding. That's usually when a guy gets one. Sometimes they'll get one at each of those times. But you'll find that sometimes when it has the blessing on it, sorry, I didn't realize my connection was unstable. Sometimes when it has the blessing on it, you'll find that there are 2 words that are not spelled correctly. And those are the 2 words that refer to God. So because one of the things that happens with the tallis, so you wear it when you're leading the service, you wear it anytime during the daytime services. If you were praying at home, you would wear it when you were praying at home. And once you choose to take on the obligation of wearing a talit, you're supposed to keep it forever. If a woman is not obligated and she chooses to take it on, she's supposed to keep wearing one forever. But the other time that you wear it, which is why I tell my kids when they're bar bat mitzvah, the first time they're officially supposed to wear one at a service is when they're leading their service for bar bat mitzvah. And I tell them to choose carefully, like don't just pick purple and gold LSU colors just because you like that team, because on Yom Kippur, it might look kind of ridiculous when you're supposed to be somber. But I remind them, and it's a weird thing to think about, so they should take it with them to camp if they go to camp that summer and wear it every morning for morning services. But the other time that you're supposed to wear it is to be buried in. If you had a tradition of wearing a talit, then when you were alive, then you're supposed to be buried in just a shroud and a talit, and the tzitzit are supposed to be snipped off because you're not fulfilling a commandment anymore. You're not alive. So I tell them to choose wisely for all of those things. We've got a few seconds. Lexi.
I'll show you what is my #1 choice for a talit, and I've explained to you why, because of the coloring matching something to that I'm honoring Brenda.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of a wise choice or something I need to rethink? Or
No, people have many reasons why they choose what they choose. Like I showed you, so this one has symbols to me. It's got powerful meaning, a number of reasons. The one that looks like this, that looks a little bit like architecture, I got because we were about to dedicate our new building, and I thought it looked like architecture. And I prefer the ones that don't have blessings on them. Some people love the ones with blessings, but I prefer the ones that don't have blessings on it. It's not like I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I know what I'm supposed to say. And so sometimes that's kind of more fun. I also like material. I have to choose with a comfortable material. Some of them are miserably uncomfortable, sometimes because they use stiff, like fancier threads, it becomes less comfortable. This is really soft. This is not at all uncomfortable. I don't know how they did it, because I've had some that are really stiff. But that's an interesting choice about what you choose and why you choose it. And then there's a question about whether someone who's not Jewish should be wearing one. And I am not trying to influence anybody to wear it. I was just talking about different symbols in the house. Whether we should or not is another story. you know, it's
With the Talit, you prefer the ones without blessings. What about, is that just for everybody to not
no,
get one, or is that?
for me to
Oh,
wear. I'm not talking about anybody else. I know people who love having the blessing on there. That's comforting. When my brother was bar mitzvah, we knew a lady who would weave the talises herself. And mom did an embroidered version of the atara with his whole name in it. I mean, so that's one, you know, there's lots of ways of choosing. So when someone is ready to choose, you let me know, we can talk it through. We already started talking, Lexi, about yours. So that's, I guess, as far as we're going, because that's as much time as we got. We talked mostly about a talit, a little bit about challah and covering things. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that when I wear my talit, it makes me cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. And it is a really, I love how it feels to wear one. It feels like you're being hugged by God at all times. It's just an amazing thing to me. And not everybody, so the woman who made the talises, the woman who was weaving them when we were kids, she took the mitzvah, the commandment, literally, and she made shawls that had 4 corners. So she put tzitzit on her 4-cornered shawls also. So women have ways of doing it so that they don't have to look like football players when they're wearing them. But I got Carol and then I got Marla. Go.
Okay, I just want to mention, I have my grandmother's candelabra that she used for Shabbos candles, but I decided I wanted to buy candlesticks, and I bought beautiful blue and white candlesticks, and I am so excited about, I have to go get candles that'll fit, but I am so excited about using my new Shabbos candlesticks.
Isn't that a cool thing? I mean, these things that we use, they connect us. I was having a conversation today with one of my sons about, there are some of these commandments are about ritual things, specify whether the stranger in your midst is allowed to do it or not allowed to do it. Most of the time it says is, that when they mention the stranger in your midst, it's about is allowed to do it. Some people may find some of these things to be weird, to imagine somebody not Jewish lighting Shabbos candles, let's say. I read this beautiful article about a woman, a sisterhood lady who converted to Judaism. She married a guy, she converted to Judaism. And before she would light candles in a public setting, she had to be Jewish. And when she finally could, it meant so much to her. And that's something to think about also. But these rituals were designed to feel closer to God. And so it's really hard. And I know that many of us grew up in a world where, kind of like imagining the apron conundrum, that about somebody not Jewish wearing a talit, or somebody not Jewish lighting Shabbos candles and things like that. And it stresses us to do that. It bothers us to do it. But sometimes it's because, like the rabbi said, it says, who made us holy by giving us commandments. And if you don't feel commanded, then if you were not commanded, just because you decide you're commanded, I mean, is that the same thing? So sometimes that's an answer. But sometimes it's complicated. There are important times when waiting for the right moment makes things more meaningful. But there are also times when if someone is wanting to do it. So the conversation we had said that they're rituals that put meaning into your life. And I love these rituals. It's really hard for me to imagine often trying to stop someone from doing it, except there are times when there are certain ones that deserve a before and after. Kids who are not yet adult Jews, there are prayers that I don't let them lead in services because I want them to feel how important it is to be an adult Jew and have that right and privilege. And there's something very, very powerful and meaningful about sometimes having to wait. All right.
Like, I never knew my father's mother. She died when my father was a teenager, and I feel a connection when I light candlesticks because I know she lit Shabbos candlesticks.
It's really powerful. Those things always help. So that's one of the things that we didn't talk about. Ritual objects often are handed down from generation to generation. I showed yesterday my wedding, the candlesticks I got for my bat mitzvah, but over there I have the candlesticks that I got from my wedding that were my grandparents' candlesticks, and that means something too. Marla, you're being patient. You're next.
Oh, every time I watch Fiddler on the Roof, a question pops in my head and I have never had it answered.
Uh-oh.
What he's wearing is sort of like something that goes over his head that sits it at the bottom. It's not a tallis. And then he has a white shirt on in either a vest or a jacket, depending on.
It is a
weather.
tallis. It's called, some people call it a talit katan. It's kind of like an undershirt, but it's a talit. And it's a talit that you wear under your clothing instead of over your clothing. Most people wear it under their clothing instead of over their clothing. But they still are supposed to have the fringes hanging out of their pants so that you can see the fringes, so that it reminds you of doing all of the commandments. And you look at it. One of my favorite books, it's over there, it's out of my reach, is called The Jewish Catalog. There are 3 versions of it. I've got 2 of them here, but the one that I like is over there. The Jewish Catalog, the first one, the red one. And they even hand wrote the first Jewish catalog. And it tells you about all of the Jewish objects that you need in the house and how to make them, how to make a talit. And they show you the one that looks like you got a towel that with a hole in the middle, and you could stick it on. And in some worlds, a 3-year-old will wear a talit katan, that they'll start wearing it at 3, and not wait for. And it's the one that you put it on, the prayer shawl version, that they will wait for. In the Ashkenazic world, it's usually until you're 13. And in the Sephardic world, in many Sephardic communities, you don't wear a prayer shawl talit until you're married. But it is a form of a talit. You'll see it if you look it up. I was always taught to call it a talit katan. I bet it's got another name too. And we may have to. We're supposed to end. I've got to let people go if they need to go. So hold on one second. Let me